The immediate cause. The real world bears no resemblance to the world of fairy tales in which everyone lives happily ever after. We cannot avoid the truth that life is imperfect, incomplete, unsatisfactory. The truth of the existence of suffering. Given this reality, the important things for us to know are whether suffering has a cause, and if so, whether it is possible to remove that cause so that suffering may be removed. If the events that cause our suffering are simply random occurrences over which we can have no control or influence, then we are powerless and might as well give up the attempt to find a way out of suffering. Or if our suffering are dictated by an omnipotent being acting in an arbitrary and inscrutable manner, then we ought to find out how to propitiate this being so that he will no longer inflict suffering on us. The Buddha realized that our suffering is not merely a product of chance, there are causes behind it. As there are causes for all phenomena, the law of cause and effect, karma, is universal and fundamental to existence, nor are the causes beyond our control. Karma. The word karma, or in its more widely known Sanskrit form karma, is popularly understood as meaning fate. Unfortunately, the connotations of this word are exactly opposite to what the Buddha intended by karma. Fate is something outside our control, the decree of providence, what has been preordained, preordained for each one of us. Karma, however, literally means action. Our own actions are the causes of whatever we experience. All beings own their deeds, inherit their deeds, originate from their deeds, are tied to their deeds. Their deeds are their refuge. As their deeds are base or noble, so will be their life. Everything that we encounter in life is the result of our own actions. Consequently, we can each become master of our fate by becoming master of our actions. Each of us is responsible for the actions that give rise to our suffering. Each of us has the means to end the suffering in our actions. The Buddha said, "You are your own master, you make your own future." As it is, each of us is like a blindfolded man who has never learned to drive. Sitting behind the wheel of a speeding car on a busy highway, he is not likely to reach his destination without mishap. He may think that he is driving the car, but actually the car is driving him. If he wants to avoid an accident, let alone arrive at his goal, he should remove the blindfold, learn how to operate the vehicle, and steer it out of danger as quickly as possible. Similarly, we must become aware of what we do and then learn to perform actions that will lead us where we really wish to go. Three types of actions. There are three types of actions: physical, vocal, and mental. Normally, we attach most importance to physical actions, less to vocal actions, and less to mental actions. Beating a person appears to us a graver action than speaking to him insultingly, and both seem more serious than an unexpressed ill will toward the person. Certainly, this would be the view according to the man-made law of each country. But according to Dhamma, the law of nature, mental action is most important. A physical or vocal actions assumes totally different significance according to the intention with which it is done. A surgeon uses his scalpel to perform an emergency life-saving operation which turns out to be unsuccessful, leading to the death of the patient. A murderer uses his dagger to stab his victim to death. Physically, their actions are similar, with the same effect, but mentally they are poles apart. The surgeon acts out of compassion, the murderer out of hatred. The result each achieves will be totally different according to his mental action. Similarly, in the case of speech, the intention is most important. A man quarrels with a colleague and abuses him, calling him a fool. He speaks out of anger. The same man sees his child playing in the mud and tenderly calls him a fool. He speaks out of love. In both cases, the same words are spoken, but to express virtually opposite states of mind. It is the intention of our speech which determines the result. Words and deeds or their external effects are merely consequences of mental actions. They are properly judged according to the nature of the intention to which they give expression. It is the mental action which is the real karma, the cause which will give results in future. Understanding this truth, the Buddha announced, mind precedes all phenomena. Mind matters most. Everything is mind made. If with an impure mind you speak or act thus, then suffering follows you, as the cart wheel follows the foot of the draft animal. If with a pure mind you speak or act, then happiness follows you, as a shadow that never departs. The cause of suffering, but which mental actions determine our fate? If the mind consists of nothing but consciousness, perception, sensation, and reaction, then which of these gives rise to suffering? Each of them is involved to some degree in the process of suffering. However, the first three are primarily passive. Consciousness merely receives the raw data of experience. Perception places the data in a category. Sensation signals the occurring of the previous step. The job of these three is only to digest incoming information, but when the mind starts to react passively, gives way to attraction or repulsion, liking or disliking, this reaction sets in motion a fresh chain of events. At the beginning of the chain is reaction, sankhara. This is why the Buddha said, whatever suffering arises has a reaction as its cause. If all reactions cease to be, then there is no more suffering. The real karma, the real cause of suffering is the reaction of the mind. One fleeting reaction of liking or disliking may not be very strong and may not give much result, but it can have a cumulative effect. The, the reaction is repeated moment after moment, intensifying with each repetition and developing into craving or aversion. This is what in his first sermon the Buddha called tanha, literally thirst, the mental habit of insatiable longing for what is not, which implies an equal and irremediable dissatisfaction with what is, and the stronger longing and dissatisfaction become, the deeper their influence on our thinking, our speech, and our actions, and the more suffering they will cause. Some reactions, the Buddha said, are like lines drawn on the surface of a pool of water. As soon as they are drawn, they are erased. Others are like lines traced on the sandy beach. If drawn in the morning, they are gone by night, wiped away by the tide or the wind. Others are like lines cut deeply into rock with chisel and hammer. They too will be obliterated as the rock erodes, but it will take ages for them to disappear. Throughout each day of our lives, the mind keeps generating reactions. But if at the end of the day we try to remember them, we shall be able to recall only one or two which made a deep impression that day. Again, if at the end of a month we try to remember all our reactions, we shall be able to recall only one or two which made the deepest impression that month. Again, at the end of a year, we shall be able to recall only the one or two reactions that left the deepest impression during that year. Such deep reactions as these are very dangerous and lead to immense suffering. The first step towards emerging from such suffering is to accept the reality of it, not as a philosophical concept or an article of faith, but as a fact of existence which affects each one of us in our lives. With this acceptance and an understanding of what suffering is and why we suffer, we can stop being driven and start to drive. By learning to realize directly our own nature, we can set ourselves on the path leading out of suffering. Questions and answers. Question: isn't suffering a natural part of life? Why should we try to escape from it? SN Goenka: we have become so involved in suffering that to be free from it seems unnatural. But when you experience the real happiness of mental purity, you will know what you will know that this is the natural state of the mind. Question: can't the experience of suffering enable people and help them to grow in character? SN Goenka: yes. In fact, this technique deliberately uses suffering as a tool to make one a noble person, but it will work only if you learn how to observe suffering objectively. If you are attached to your suffering, the experience will not enable you. You will always remain miserable. Question: isn't taking control of our actions a kind of suppression? SN Goenka: no. You learn just to observe objectively whatever is happening. If someone is angry and tries to hide his anger to swallow it, then yes, it's suppression. But by observing the anger, you will find that automatically it passes away. You become free from the anger if you learn how to observe it objectively. If we keep observing ourselves, how can we live life in any natural way? We will be so busy watching ourselves that we can't act freely or spontaneously. That is not what people find after completing a meditation course. Here you learn a mental training that will give you the ability to observe yourself in daily life whenever whenever you need to do so. Note that you will keep practicing with closed eyes all day throughout your life, but just as the strength you gain by physical exercise helps you in daily life, So this mental exercise will also strengthen you. What you call free spontaneous action is really blind reaction, which is always harmful. By learning to observe yourself, you will find that whenever a difficult situation arises in life, you can keep the balance of your mind. With that balance, you can choose freely how to act. You will take real action, which is always positive, always beneficial for you and for all others. Question: aren't they any chance happenings, random occurrence without a cause? As in Goenka, nothing happens without a cause. It is not possible. Sometimes our limited senses and intellects cannot clearly find it, but that does not mean that there is no cause. Question: are you saying that everything in life is predetermined? SN Goenka will. Certainly, our past actions will give fruit, good or bad. They will determine the type of life we have, the general situation in which we find ourselves. But what does not mean that whatever happens to us is predestined, ordained by our past actions, and that nothing else can happen. This is not the case. Our past actions influence the flow of our lives, directing them towards pleasant or unpleasant experiences. But present actions are equally important. Nature has given us the ability to become masters of our present actions. With that mastery, we can change our future. Question: but surely the actions of others also affect us? SN Goenka: of course, we are influenced by the people around us and by our environment, and we keep influencing them as well. If the majority of people, for example, are in favor of violence, then war and destruction occur, causing many to suffer. But if people start to purify their minds, then violence cannot happen. The root of the problem lies in the mind of each individual human being. Because society is composed of individuals, if each person starts changing, then society will change and war and destruction will become rare events. Question: how can we help each other if each person must face the results of his own actions? SN Goenka: our own mental actions have an influence on others. If we generate nothing but negativity in the mind, that negativity has a harmful effect on those who come into contact with us. If we fill the mind with positivity, with goodwill towards others, then it will have a helpful effect on those around us. You cannot control the actions, the karma of others, but you can become master of yourself in order to have a positive influence on those around you. Question: why is being wealthy good karma? If it is, does that mean to say that most people in the West have good karma and most people in the third world have bad karma? SN Goenka: wealth alone is not a good karma. If you become wealthy but remain miserable, what is the use of this wealth? Having wealth and also happiness, real happiness, that is good karma. Most important is to be happy, whether you are wealthy or not. Surely, question, surely it is unnatural never to react. It seems so if you have experienced only the wrong habit pattern of an impure mind, but it is natural for a pure mind to remain detached, full of love, compassion, goodwill, joy, equanimity. Learn to experience that. Question: how can we be involved in life unless we react? Instead of reacting, you learn to act with a balanced mind. Vipassana meditators do not become inactive like vegetables, they learn how to act positively. If you can change your life pattern, from reaction to action, then you have attained something very valuable and you can change it by practicing Vipassana. A story: seed and fruit. As the cause is, so the effect will be. As the seed is, so the fruit will be. As the action is, so the result will be. In the same soil, a farmer plants two seeds. A farmer plants two seeds. One a seed of sugar cane, the other a seed of a neem tree, a tropical tree which is very bitter. Two seeds in the same earth, receiving the same water, the same sunshine, the same air. Nature gives the same nourishment to both. Two tiny plants emerge and start growing. And what has happened to the neem tree? It has developed with bitterness in every fiber, while the sugar cane has developed with every fiber of its sweet. Why is nature, or if you prefer, why is God so kind to one and so cruel to the other? No, no, nature is neither kind nor cruel. It works according to fixed laws. Nature only helps the quality of the seed to manifest. All the nourishment merely helps to seed to reveal the quality that is latent within itself. The seed of the sugar cane has the quality of sweetness, therefore the plant will have nothing but sweetness. The seed of the neem trees has the quality of bitterness, the plant will have nothing but bitterness. As the seed is, so the fruit will be. The farmer goes to the neem tree, bows down 3 times, walks around it 108 times, and then offers flowers, incense, candles, fruit, and sweets, and then he starts praying, "O Neem God, please give me sweet mangoes. I want sweet mangoes." Poor Neem God, he cannot give them. He has no power to do so. If someone wants sweet mangoes, he ought to plant a seed of a mango tree. Then he need not to cry and beg for help from anyone. The fruit that he will get will be nothing but sweet mangoes. As the seed is, so the fruit will be. Our difficulty, our ignorance, is that we remain unheedful while planting seeds. We keep planting seeds of neem, but when the time comes for fruit, we are suddenly alert. We want seed of we want sweet mangoes, and we keep crying and praying and hoping for mangoes. This doesn't work.